Most of my teachers used to see it to be the one that was revealed right after Al-Alaq. So probably the first thing that the Sahaba were subjected to, the first thing he heard, alayhi salatu wasalam, which is why the majority of scholars point out this story to be the first story in the Quran that was heard by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and the Sahaba in terms of sequence of revelation. The first one they actually listened to. Obviously, it would start a series of ongoing stories in the Quran. The Quran is filled with stories. This is the first one that they heard, the stories of Ashabul Jannah. I'm going to tell you the story, then we're going to point something out at the end that exists at the beginning of it. So we'll kind of ignore the beginning of it for a second and tell you the rest of the story. It occurs in a place called Darawan in Yemen. It's north of Sana'a today. Still exists. The piece of land where the story occurred still exists today. It's quite the scene. You can look it up online if you want to see the pictures. Some people have gone there and taken videos of this burnt land that nothing grows in. There's no green anywhere on it. It's been like that for many, many years, for one reason or the other. We don't know exactly the timing of the story. Some scholars say it was before Isa alayhi salam, and some say it was right after him. And we don't know exactly the nature of the person or the people the story occurs to, but we know that they're Ahl Kitab. Whether they were Jewish or whether they were Christian, we don't know. But they were Ahl Kitab during the time when the nature of the belief itself was appropriate and correct before it was manipulated and changed by the hand of man. And the story is of a man, a gentleman, who had an orchard, had a Jannah. And this orchard he had was the bab of his rizq. So this was the means of his provision. This is how he made a living. This is how he lived. He lived based on whatever this orchard gave him. He was a farmer. And he was known to be quite generous. He was someone who gave a lot from the wealth that he had, and specifically from this orchard, he gave away a lot. He had a habit of before the time within the season where you would reap basically the crops, he would open the gates at a certain time after Fajr and allow all the miskeens to come and just take what they want. And then he would harvest and go and sell. He did this every season, multiple times a year, because there were different types of crops. It was the piece of land is actually quite humongous. It's very big. And don't imagine a small little backyard. It's actually acres upon acres of land. It just had a lot of different types of trees, and a lot of crops were grown. And that was the habit. The habit where he would open the gates after Fajr, and whoever wanted to come in and fill their baskets or fill it for themselves, he let them do it. And once they were done, the sun was up, he would harvest the food or the crops, and he would go and he would sell it. This gentleman passed away of old age, and he left 3 sons. نَبْلَوْنَاهُمْ كَمَا بَلَوْنَا أَصْحَابَ الْجَنَّةِ. So they're called in the Quran Ashab al-Jannah, the owners of the orchard. Now they had a different outlook, as most sons do in the early stages of their life. They didn't have the same affinity towards giving as their father did. It's a skill that you learn, and it's an acquired taste. Giving is an acquired taste. You're not born wanting to do it, which is why you have to go to kindergarten and have to teach you how to share. You don't want to. The moment you have the ability not to share, you don't. It's the nature of the human nafs. To find joy in giving, which is what the father had arrived at, takes time and takes discipline for you to find joy and find beauty in giving others and seeing people's happiness when they take something that is yours. When you see, that takes a little bit of work. It doesn't just happen automatically. It's very possible, but it doesn't happen automatically. The father left this legacy. This story is important to understand the dynamics of it. This story exists in a surah where the Prophet ﷺ is being given the moral code, the code of conduct. This is what you stand for. These are your ethics. Right? This is what you're going to need to be a good Muslim in terms of ethics. Right? The beginning of the surah is just a list of things he shouldn't be doing, alayhi salatu wasalam. If you want to know his character, just look at the opposite of each ayah. فلا تطع المكذبين ودوا لو تدهنوا فيدهنون ولا تطع كل حلاف مهين هماز مشاء بنميم مناع للخير معتد أثيم عتل بعد ذلك زنيم أن كان ذا مال وبنين. He talks about 12 different characteristics that he does not want the Prophet ﷺ to have. And don't do these things. And then if you take those 12 characteristics and you look at the opposite, that's who he was ﷺ through his life. Right after that, we have this story. This story is a story of ethics. It's a story of ethics. But it's looking at ethics from a perspective that's a little bit different than what the surah went out and talked about at the beginning of it and right after. That's why Surah Al-Qalam is important, in my opinion, for people to understand. Like, you should definitely study it. Because the father had an ethic. He had built an ethic or a value. He spent time building it. And that is what the children should have inherited. They thought they inherited an orchard. They didn't. They inherited a value. He passed down generosity to them. That's what he passed down, not the orchard. But they didn't understand that. They didn't like the fact that he did this, that he opened the gates every season and let people come and take whatever the heck they wanted. It was their wealth. There was 3 of them. They were young. They had dreams. They wanted to get married and build homes and go on expensive vacations. So they didn't have a lot to spare from this orchard. They didn't want to give this away to people. The old man was senile. The old man just didn't care. He didn't think about us. He wasn't thinking about us. إِذْ أَقْسَمُوا, when they swore, when they sat down, people feed off each other. So the brothers are sitting there and they fed off each other. Yeah, every year he does this. Every year we tell him that, maybe don't do, and every year we haven't been able to do this, and we haven't, and the roof needs to be changed, and our neighbors are annoying. We have to buy them out so we can put a nice big fence. They fed off each other. So أقسموا, so they swore. لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا. الصَّرْم is to harvest and gather. So sarm is 2 things, is for you to harvest it, take it from the tree, and then put it in boxes ready to be sold. That's a sarm. Some farmers in, I think, parts of Palestine still use that word. It's not used in Syria, but I know that's where it's used elsewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. لَا يَصْرِمُنَّهَا مُصْبِحِينَ, in the morning. وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ. And they do not make any exceptions. They don't leave a tree. They don't go and leave a tree. Because you could say, well, maybe you don't open the gates for you to take everything. We'll choose what we give the miskins. We'll choose. Not even that. وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ. They leave no exception. We're going to take it all. The plan was to go really early. Really early, before the time their father used to open the gates, before that. To go really early, before the time that the people are used to coming with their baskets to fill their food. They would go before that, harvest everything, put it in trucks or on the back of horse, and go to sell it. So by the time the people came with their baskets, it was empty. So they wouldn't have to send people away. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want to have to look at someone coming with a basket to fill their food and say, go home, there's nothing for you. They had something left. They had something left. They had some politeness left in them. They felt it wasn't appropriate, so they said, we'll just go harvest it all. And it'll be empty by the time they come. Like, we won't even be there. And they'll come, they'll find nothing, and they'll leave, and we won't have to tell somebody to turn back and go home because there's nothing for you. That's the intention they made. They agreed on it. إِذْ أَقْسَمُوا لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا مُصْبِحِينَ وَلَا يَسْتَثْنُونَ فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِّن رَبِّكَ. طَافَ عَلَيْهَا. Taf is a word that means something to move in a direction. So we use it for tawaf, which is circumambulation, rotation around something. But usually you'd have to say tafa hawl. You have to use the word around. Tafa ala is different. For something, so it's not circumambulation anymore. It is something that is moving, directed in a specific direction. It will come and it will encompass something. فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا, meaning something. What was it that طَافَ عَلَيْهَا? طَائِف. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that terminology, it's telling you it doesn't matter. إِذْ يَغْشَى السِّدْرَةَ مَا يَغْشَى. When the sidra was covered by that which it was covered by. مَا يَغْشَى. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point here is not what exactly was sent upon the orchard. It's not the point. We don't have to sit down and study what was sent at the origin. It doesn't matter. فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِّن رَبِّكَ, something that your Lord sent upon it. He sent upon it something, your Lord sent upon it something that He sent upon it. وَهُمْ نَائِمُونَ, when they were sleeping at night. فَأَصْبَحَتْ كَالصَّرِيمِ, and it looked like the whole land was harvested. They said, لَيَصْرِمُنَّهَا. He said, we're going to do sarm. We're going to go and harvest and take everything and leave nothing. Sarm is nothing's left at all. So He sent upon it, subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that made it look like it was harvested. Not the fruit, the land. He harvested the land, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He left nothing on it. This land will never give a fruit again because it was completely harvested. There's nothing left. فَأَصْبَحَتْ كَالصَّرِيمِ. And it's min jamal wa jinas al-tibaq في Quran, when he uses subhanahu wa ta'ala the same word. When they say something and then He responds to them with the same thing. All right, I'll do that too. You want to do sarm? Well, I'll do it for you. Here you go. It's sarim now. See how you like that? You see, you don't own that land. That land was never yours. That land was owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it still is. It's not yours. See that piece? The Father understood. It takes time. It takes time. It doesn't. It's hard. It's hard up front. It doesn't happen right immediately. That conclusion takes time. First, you just feel like, all right, maybe I owe something, so you give, and then you're like, no, for sure I owe something. Then you give. Then you say, well, there's beauty in giving, and then you see it's not mine. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm grateful that you made me the steward of this land of yours. It's yours, so I'll give it to your people. And I'll take that which I need to benefit for myself. That takes time. That's a continuation. It doesn't happen up front. The youngsters, they didn't pick it up. Their father practiced it. He role modeled it for them, but they didn't want to pick it up. There was this little bit of greed. So they thought it was theirs. It's not. It's not yours. It's His subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَأَصْبَحَتْ كَالصَّرِيمِ فَتَنَادَوْا مُصْبِحِينَ. So they call upon each other in the early hours of the morning. One brother, Yalla fi, get up. All right, Yalla fulan, get up. هَنِغْدُوا عَلَى حَرْثِكُمْ. Yalla, let's go. Al-ghadu is to go early, really early. Right? Al-ghadu is when you go before Fajr. هَنِغْدُوا عَلَى حَرْثِكُمْ. Go to the harvest. In kuntum صَارِمِينَ. If you have the intention of taking everything. They still have the intention. The Quran is pointing out that they weren't punished because of a whim or because of a thought. No, they were punished because they had made a plan. This is what they're going to do. أَنْ يَغْدُوا عَلَى حَرْثِكُمْ. They were getting up, they got themselves up before the sun was out, before there's any light in the horizon. إِن كُنتُمْ صَارِمِينَ فَانْطَلَقُوا. So they went. وَهُمْ يَتَخَافَتُونَ. They're speaking low, they're whispering. So they don't wake anyone up. So no one hears them and then says, oh, you're going, I'll go with you and get my nasib that your father used to give me. No, they're just whispering. No one should hear them. أَلَّا يَدْخُلَنَّهَا الْيَوْمَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِسْكِينٌ. They're whispering. What are they saying? No miskeen enters it today. We get this done before a miskeen. لَا يَدْخُلَنَّهَا. Indeed, no miskeen will enter this orchard today. It's very clear. Their intention was made very clear. أَلَّا يَدْخُلَنَّ وَغَدَوْا عَلَى حَرْدٍ قَادِرِينَ. This ayah in the midst of it, I used to always forget it when I memorized the surah as a kid, because I understood the story and I couldn't figure out why that ayah was important. When I was a kid, I couldn't figure out why this little piece there, because you understand the story, the continuation. It's almost like they call it in Arabic jumla i'tiradiyya, meaning it's a sentence in between sentences that the story you could easily tell the story without needing it. But it's something he points out, subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying, indeed, they left early. The word hard means for you to have hard is holding back something, is to take it and hold it back, deprive others of it. That's the word hard in Arabic. That's what it means. وَالْأَخْذُ وَالْمَنْعُ. For you to take something and hold it back at the same time, meaning you're taking it for yourself and you're keeping it. You're not sharing it. That's literally the meaning of. There's no other meaning for this word, and it's not really used anywhere else in the Quran. You can look in the word hard, look it up. There's no other use for it in the Quran. It's the only time it's used, and this is the only meaning it has. And if you go to Lisan al-Arab, there's no other uses. It's for you to take something and keep it. It's two things. Taking is one thing, keeping it, holding on to it, not sharing it is another thing. This is together. You go take it and you hold on to it. You're refusing to share. وَغَدَوْا عَلَى حَرْدٍ قَادِرِينَ. They left that morning capable of taking and holding on to something and not sharing it. They were capable. They had the ability. Because why? Because Allah said, what He's saying subhanahu wa ta'ala is, I gave them that ability. I gave them the stewardship of that land. And they were capable of holding back what was in it for themselves. They could. And they made that, it's as if to say, shame on them. Shame on you to abuse your power. Shame on you to exercise that type of power upon something that I gave you the qadir. I gave you the stewardship over it. I gave you that stewardship. It wasn't yours. It was mine. But I gave you stewardship over it. Shame on you for going with the intention of keeping it all to yourself because you can. Just because you can. When it wasn't yours to be. Understand that this is what this story is telling. It's a very difficult story to accept if you don't understand the context of what I'm trying to explain to you. He is pointing out that it was never theirs to begin with. It was always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the moment that they stopped seeing that, because this was an act, here's the beauty of the story. What He did to them was an act of mercy. It was an act of love. He burnt their orchard to the ground. For eternity, this land will never give another green thing. Never will a green thing ever grow in this land till the day of judgment. Because He loved them. Because He wanted to teach, because they had to learn. Now He could have left them. And they could have went and they could have taken it all for themselves and bought their homes and went on their vacations and built their empire. And then Yawm al-Qiyamah, they would come back to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala and hold them accountable for their hard. For the fact that they held back what was, but no. He decided to give them a lifeline in the form of burning it down to the ground. فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهَا. So if you go, I don't know if you've been to farming land in the Middle East, they're all the same. If you miss if you don't know which right to take within these big pieces of land, you'll get lost easily. Yeah, we used to have a piece of land a little bit farther away from where we lived. So you had to know at night exactly, not the first or the second right, the third right within these. Or if you make the wrong turn, then you're lost for a good 15 minutes before you can figure out how to get back again. And that's with flashlights and stuff. So if you're doing this way before, the concept of electricity existed, and they're going way before Fajr, then it's easy for them to come to a conclusion that فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهَا قَالُوا إِنَّا لَضَالُّونَ. Oh, we must have taken the wrong turn. Did we take the wrong turn here? What did we do? I counted it correctly, did we not? Because obviously it's impossible to accept what they saw. The land was burnt to the ground. There was nothing left of it. قَالُوا إِنَّا لَضَالُّونَ. Now we must have mistaken took the wrong turn. And then after they stood there for a few minutes, they figured it out. بَلْ نَحْنُ مَحْرُومُونَ. Bal means no. What happened was not that. This is what it is. نَحْنُ مَحْرُومٌ. We've been deprived. It's been taken away from us. قَالَ أَوْسَطُهُمْ. أَوْسَطُهُمْ, the middle of them. Now, some scholars say in terms of age, but most scholars say it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with Iman. أَوْسَطُهُمْ means the one who had the most Iman amongst them. The one who had out of the three of them, he was the one who's like, I don't know, we should be doing this. All right, we'll do it. Are you sure? Maybe we do something. They're both like, no, we should do. All right, fine, khalas, we'll do. But deep down inside, he was like, I don't feel this is the right thing to do. So when he saw it, قَالَ أَوْسَطُهُمْ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. Did I not tell you that you should perform tasbih? Why tasbih? Why out of everything is he saying this? You have to ask yourself, why? لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. لَوْلَا means you should, instead of making this intention, you should have performed tasbih. That's what lawla is. Lawla in the Quran, that's what it's used for. To say, what you should have done was this, instead of whatever it is that you did. لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. He chose that one. Out of all the different acts of worship, he said, تُسَبِّحُونَ. قَالُوا سُبْحَانَ رَبِّنَا إِنَّا كُنَّا ظَالِمِينَ. What does tasbih mean? When you say tasbih and you refer to it as exalting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the concept of it is seeing that all good things their source and origin come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all that is not, doesn't. That's what tasbih is in its essence, if you want to take it and break it down to its elements. Tasbih is just seeing that which is good coming from Him, and that which is not coming from Him. Meaning you see no flaw, you see no mistake, sourced or originated in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you see only that which is good. They missed that for a moment. Their fundamental flaw with their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that wasn't there. They didn't see it anymore. Because they wanted everything in the orchard for themselves. They knew that their father maintained this orchard, and this orchard grew because of his generosity. They knew that their father built a reputation of goodness, a reputation that he was loved by people, and the orchard had barakah in it because they gave from it. But they lost that affiliation. They lost the connection between that and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they couldn't see it anymore. And because they lost that concept of tasbih, they weren't able to see the flawlessness of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set up for them. They only saw that which they didn't like, and they lost that association. So He said, لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. You should have done tasbih. You see, Isa عليه السلام on the Day of Judgment, when he's asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why is it that you and your mother were worshipped? It wasn't his fault. He did nothing, alayhi salam, to just to elude people that he was worthy of worship, nor his mother. When he was asked that question, because he didn't do anything about it, his answer was, Subhanak ma yakunu li an aqula ma laysa li bihaq. That was the answer, Subhanak. I mean, I don't blame you. I don't see you to be flawed for this. So when they came to this piece of land that was burnt to the ground, who's to blame? فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِّن مِّن رَبِّكَ. The ta'if came from your Lord. Who do they blame when they go and find their only source of income to be burnt to the ground overnight? They blame Allah. No, you don't blame God. You have to perform tasbih. They should have performed tasbih beforehand and seen the source of all that was good coming from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. They didn't. They thought it was something else. They thought it was the land. So He burnt it for them to see maybe they'll wake up then. They could have maybe not woken up. It's easy, by the way, for the story to have a different ending. The ending could have been different. They could have said, why did He do this to us? What type of God would do this to us and take away our only source of income? Jalla Jalalullah. They could have said that, but they didn't. They realized we should have لَوْلَا تُسَبِّحُونَ. We should have performed tasbih. Now we'll do it. We've lost our land. We won't. Subhana Rabbina. We see you to be flawless, Ya Rabb. We don't blame you for what happened here. We don't object to what just occurred in terms of losing everything. Inna kunna zalimin. No, it was our fault. We were the oppressors. We're the ones who broke the legacy of our father. We're the ones who didn't understand what it was that we were given. فَأَقْبَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ يَتَلَاوَمُونَ. They turned to each other and started blaming. Who came up with this idea? Wasn't it you? Weren't you the first one? No, it wasn't me. You're the one who said it first. Yeah, but you're... And they started blaming each other. Which one of us pushed this farther? It's always a waste of time, by the way. It doesn't matter. قَالُوا يَا وَيْلَنَا. We are in, what a bad outcome. Inna kunna طاغين. Indeed, we were transgressors. See, they first said oppressors. Then they thought about it a little bit more, and they came to the conclusion, no, it wasn't oppression, it was transgression. It was even worse. عَسَى رَبُّنَا أَن يُبْدِلَنَا خَيْرًا مِنْهَا. We ask our Lord that He replaces us with one that is better than it. إِنَّا إِلَىٰ رَبِّنَا رَاغِبُونَ. Indeed, we have desire in the reward of our Lord. They performed tawbah that day, the three of them. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, كَذَلِكَ الْعَذَابِ. That is the example of punishment. وَالْعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ. And the punishment of the Day of Judgment is worse. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. If people only knew. They made it. They were able to repent before they died. Had He not burnt that orchard for them, they probably would have not done that. They would have taken what they thought was theirs. They would have deprived people of it. They would have stopped the legacy of their father. They would have thought that the inheritance that they actually took from their father was the piece of land and not the ethic that he built over a long period of time. He built a legacy of an ethic, of a value, of a behavior, something beautiful, which was generosity and the love of the miskin and taking care of them. That's what he left them. He didn't leave them an orchard with trees. He left them a legacy of generosity, and they just missed that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that they didn't forget about it. Had He left them with the orchard, they would have forgotten what their father actually gave them, what He left them. But what happened that day was an act of mercy. So they woke up and they understood what their father left. The narrations that we have in the books of tafsir is that they would go on and they would work and they would buy other orchards and they would continue the legacy of their fathers within it. It's not in the Quran, but it doesn't have to be, because you just look it up and you'll find it's like the movie ends here and they can go see what happened and you read what happened later. That's what happened. And they figured out that they should be different, so they were. Let's go to the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story starts with the word Inna balawnahum kama balawna. Inna balawnahum who? What does that mean? Indeed, we have tested them. Balawna is to put someone to a test. So what is balawnahum? Who is it? Inna balawnahum kama balawna, like we tested, or like we put to the test, Ashabul, Jannah, the people of the orchard. So that's how it begins. That's how the story starts. So who is he talking about here? Yeah, he's talking about Quraysh. Inna balawnahum. Indeed, we have put to the test the people of Quraysh, like we put to the test Ashabul Jannah. But where is the similarity in the test? Ahl Makkah did not have huge orchards. The similarity of the test is the legacy of the father. It's the legacy of the father. You see, Quraysh have a legacy of their father, of their forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam, of Ismail alayhi salam. They had a legacy, and they ditched it. They ditched that which their forefathers had left them. And they thought what they inherited was the ruling of the Bayt al-Haram, was the ruling of the city, and the ruling of, it wasn't. The legacy were the ethics that Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam taught, were the values that they brought forward. And just like Ashab al-Jannah forgot about what it was that they were supposed to continue from their fathers, so has Quraysh. But unlike Ashab al-Jannah, Quraysh did not have their land burnt to the ground like Ashab al-Jannah did. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ was sent amongst them. They were given a lifeline. Here, we're going to give you someone who will remind you. Instead of reminding you by burning it to the ground, I'll send you Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He is going to be the active, he's the lifeline for you. He'll come and he'll teach you something. And if you learn it, then you don't have to. Some of them didn't, and some of them didn't. Some of them didn't, some of them did. But that's why he said, Inna balawnahum. We put them to the test like we put Ashab al-Jannah to the test. Where their father passed away and they had to decide whether they continue the good, never stop something beautiful. This is just never stop something beautiful in this world once it's your ability to do so. If something beautiful, there's a good sunnah happening and now you're carrying, you're holding the reins, don't stop something beautiful. It's a big musibah. It's one thing not to start something, but it's another thing for there to be a legacy of khair and you're the one who stops it. That's a whole different story. If there's a continuation of khair and then you're now in charge and you decide to cut it off, to stop khair, that is a problem. That is a problem. That goes against the natural design of this world. If anything, khair has to grow, not being cut down. There's one thing if there's no khair happening and you continue that. It's another thing when you've been given a legacy of goodness and you decide to ditch it and get rid of it. That is, because not everyone is given that legacy. If those who are, they don't continue it, spread it and grow it, then there's no hope. And there's no hope anymore. There's no hope of any khair continuing. If those who are inheriting that goodness, it has nothing to do with an orchard. You're inheriting the goodness and not continuing it and spreading it and growing it, then there's no hope. And that was the story. The first story the Sahaba listened to is go back and look at the legacy of khair that you inherit and continue it and do not stop and do not hold it back. And the example here was of generosity, but there are many others. There are many others. I'll tell you a funny story before we end. So the masjid I was in, it was imam for around a decade in Syria when I was young. It was an old masjid that was built maybe a couple of, maybe almost a bit less than a century before I held on to it. But it was an old masjid. They built a new one, and that's where everyone went, and had a long, big minara and a large high minbar. And this masjid was a simple one. So my audience there were either the children I was teaching, so everyone under 20, or the old men who grew up in that masjid, so people over 80. I had no other, those are two demographics I had. 80 above and 20 under. It's almost like everyone between those two ages has sworn not to come to that place. So I had either children or grandfathers. And the grandfathers didn't know me by my father, they knew me by my grandfather. They knew me by being the son of my grandfather. My grandfather was the Mukhtar, he was the, I don't know, the mayor maybe, I don't know what you would call it. And Mukhtar is the leader of the village. And they used to like him because he was a generous guy. He used to give, he didn't have a lot, but he used to give. He used to always make sure people got. So this old man would catch me almost every week in Abu Riyadh. He would come and tell me, your grandfather used to bring everybody a bag of lahm, like a meat. But for me, he used to bring me 2 chickens because he used to know that I like chickens. And I would tell him, I don't have chickens for you. Like I know it's a good legacy, rahmatullah alayh, but I have no money at all and I can't get you chickens. But he would tell me this story I think he was probably a little bit demented, but every single week after Salat al-Fajr on a Friday, he would tell me this story, and I told him, I know, Abu Riyadh, before my grandfather got you 2 chickens. So once I did it finally, like I decided, I went to and I told him, look, I want 2 chickens to be slaughtered before Fajr, bring them to the masjid on Friday, and give this gentleman. And that's what he did. He prepared the chickens. And that one Friday, Abu Riyadh didn't show up. That one Friday didn't have it. So I don't know where he lives. So I take the bag of chickens and I go. I'm walking around at Salat al-Fajr with 2 dead chickens in a bag, looking for this guy's house. I find it and give it to him. And I don't know if he even noticed that he got the 2 chickens or not, but he got them anyways. It's hard for a legacy of beauty to be halted or stopped. It's hard. You almost feel like it's one of the signs of Day of Judgment. Khair is happening, then someone comes and stops it or halts it or breaks it off. It's a really scary thing. So be careful of that. If something beautiful is going on, if you don't grow it, don't stop it, because that action can be detrimental to the health of a society and the wealth of a society and the legacy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us to continue. I hope that was beneficial for you from the story. Subhanakallah bihamdik, shalla la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullahu khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.